The bank was busy that afternoon, filled with customers going about their business. The tellers behind the counters were focused on counting cash, typing on computers, and helping people with their accounts. The security guard near the entrance stood with his arms crossed, occasionally glancing at the clock. It was just another ordinary day, until the old man walked in. He wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to see in a bank. His clothes were worn out, his shoes covered in dust, and over his shoulder, he carried a large sack. The sack looked heavy, dragging slightly behind him as he walked with a slow but determined pace. His face was aged, lined with deep wrinkles, and his gray beard swayed slightly with every step. People in the bank barely noticed him at first, until he stopped right in the middle of the hall. A few heads turned. The old man cleared his throat, his voice rough but loud enough to echo in the silent gaps between conversations. "I'm here to claim what's mine," he announced. Some customers exchanged confused looks. A woman standing near the ATM whispered something to the man beside her. One of the bank clerks, a young man with neatly combed hair, looked up from his computer and frowned. The security guard straightened, stepping forward slightly but not making a move yet. The manager, a middle-aged man with a round belly and a suit that seemed a little too tight, walked out from his office at the back. His name tag read Mr. Adil. He adjusted his tie and approached the old man with a practiced smile, the kind used to handle difficult customers without causing a scene. "Sir, do you have an account with us? How can we help you today?" The old man tightened his grip on the sack and looked straight into Mr. Adil's eyes. "This bank, this building, all of it belongs to me." For a second there was silence, and then someone snickered. A man near the counter chuckled and shook his head. A woman near the waiting area covered her mouth, trying to suppress a laugh. Even one of the tellers, a young woman with glasses, smiled before quickly looking down. Mr. Adil, keeping his polite tone, chuckled as well. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This bank belongs to a well-established corporation. Perhaps you're thinking of another place." The old man didn't laugh. His expression remained firm, unshaken. He slowly untied the knot on his sack and let it fall open just enough for the people nearby to get a glimpse of what was inside. The security guard took a step closer, his hand resting near his belt, ready for anything. For the first time, the laughter in the room faded. A few people near the old man leaned forward, trying to see. The old man took a deep breath before speaking again, his voice carrying a weight that made even the bank manager hesitate. "I have proof," he said. Mr. Adil's smile wavered slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "Proof?" The old man nodded. "Yes, proof that this land, this building, this bank was once mine." The atmosphere in the bank shifted. No one was laughing anymore. A few customers moved closer, curiosity taking over their initial amusement. The security guard, now fully alert, positioned himself near the old man but didn't make a move yet. The tellers stopped their work, eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them. "What kind of proof?" Mr. Adil asked, his voice a little less confident now. The old man reached into his sack and pulled out something wrapped in a cloth. With careful hands, he unwrapped it, revealing a stack of aged documents. The paper was yellowed with time, the edges fragile and worn. The ink had faded in some places, but the words and seals were still visible. Mr. Adil's brows furrowed as he took a hesitant step closer. He wasn't laughing anymore. Neither was anyone else. The old man lifted the papers slightly and looked around the room. "Years ago," he said, his voice steady, "this land belonged to my family. And I have the documents to prove it." A nervous whisper ran through the bank. Some customers exchanged glances, while others looked at the documents with interest. The security guard, sensing the tension, glanced at Mr. Adil, waiting for a signal on what to do next. Mr. Adil hesitated before reaching out. "May I see those?" The old man didn't hand them over immediately. He studied Mr. Adil's face, as if measuring his intentions. Then, slowly, he placed the documents on the counter. The manager picked up the top sheet and examined it closely. His fingers tightened slightly around the paper. The silence in the bank was thick now. No one was laughing anymore. Because as Mr. Adil read the words written on that old, crumbling paper, his face lost all its color. Mr. Adil swallowed hard, his fingers gripping the edges of the old paper as he read each word carefully. His eyes darted over the faded ink, the official-looking stamps, and the signatures that, despite the wear of time, still held their authority. His breathing grew unsteady. He looked up at the old man, who stood watching him with an expression that was neither smug nor desperate, just patient. The air in the bank felt different now. Customers who had been idly waiting for their turn were now leaning in, curious. Some had even pulled out their phones, ready to record whatever was about to unfold. The security guard, usually calm and uninterested in daily bank affairs, now stood rigid, his hand near his belt, unsure if he needed to act or just observe. Mr. Adil's lips parted, but no words came out. He turned to a younger employee, a man in his late 20s sitting at one of the desks, and gestured for him to come over. The employee, wearing glasses and a neatly pressed shirt, hurried over, his gaze flickering between his boss and the old man. "Check this," Mr. Adil murmured, handing over the document. The young employee hesitated before taking it. His eyes scanned the text quickly, and then he blinked as if unsure of what he was seeing. His fingers ran over the stamp at the bottom. He looked up at Mr. Adil. "Sir, this document is very old, but it looks legitimate." A murmur ran through the crowd. A woman standing near the counter whispered, "Is he serious?" to no one in particular. The old man remained silent, watching their reactions. Mr. Adil took a deep breath, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Sir," he said, directing his attention back to the old man, "where did you get this document?" The old man's eyes darkened slightly. "It was given to me by my father before he passed. And before him, it was my grandfather's. This land was once ours, before it was taken from us." The words settled heavily in the air. People exchanged glances, some now visibly uncomfortable. The thought that this bank, this busy, well-established place, might have been built on land that was once owned by this frail-looking old man, well, it made some of them uneasy. "But that's not possible," Mr. Adil said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "This bank's property was legally acquired decades ago. We have all the records." "And I have mine," the old man interrupted, his voice steady. He tapped the papers still clutched in the younger employee's hands. "Check the dates. The land belonged to my family long before this bank was ever built." The younger employee hesitated, then flipped through the pages again. He squinted at the faded ink, tracing the lines with his finger. His expression shifted, and he glanced back at Mr. Adil. "Sir," he said quietly, "this document is dated before the records we have on file." Mr. Adil's stomach tightened. His face turned slightly pale. The bank had always operated under the belief that everything was in order, that their ownership of the property was legally sound. But now, standing in front of a man who claimed otherwise, with documents that looked disturbingly real, it felt like the ground beneath his feet was no longer solid. "This could be a misunderstanding," Mr. Adil said carefully, his voice measured. "Or a mistake." The old man let out a slow breath, not in frustration, but as if he had expected this reaction. He adjusted the sack on his shoulder, then placed both hands on the counter, leaning slightly forward. "It is not a mistake," he said. "It is a history that was erased, forgotten by those who took what was not theirs." A heavy silence followed. The customers in the bank were no longer just spectators, they were invested now. Some frowned, considering the weight of the old man's words. Others looked toward Mr. Adil, waiting to see how he would respond. The younger employee shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, if this document is real then," he hesitated, as if afraid to finish his sentence, "then we have a serious problem." Mr. Adil shot him a sharp look. Let's not jump to conclusions. The old man straightened, adjusting his sack again. He didn't seem angry or impatient. He simply waited, as if he had all the time in the world. Then he said, "I have more." A hush fell over the room. More. People leaned in closer. Even the security guard, who had been standing tensely this whole time, furrowed his brows in curiosity. Slowly, the old man reached into his sack once more and pulled out another set of papers. These were thicker, bound together with an old string. He placed them carefully on the counter. "These," he said, "contain the history of this land. Who owned it, who lived here before, and how it was taken." Mr. Adil hesitated before picking them up. His hands trembled slightly as he undid the string and opened the first page. His eyes darted across the text, scanning each line faster than the last. His breathing grew shallower. He flipped another page, then another. His face drained of color. The younger employee leaned over his shoulder to get a look and immediately drew in a sharp breath. "Sir," he whispered. Mr. Adil shut the file abruptly, his grip tightening on the papers as if he were afraid they might disappear. He looked up at the old man, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get all of this?" The old man met his gaze without flinching. "My family never let go of what was ours," he said. "Even when the world moved on and forgot us." Someone in the crowd exhaled loudly, the tension in the room nearly unbearable now. A man near the entrance whispered, "This is real, isn't it?" A woman clutched her purse, her eyes darting toward the exit as if she were standing in the middle of something much bigger than a simple bank visit. Mr. Adil's throat was dry. His mind raced, trying to find a way to dismiss this, to call it nonsense. But the documents in his hands, they told a different story. He wasn't sure what terrified him more, the possibility that the old man was telling the truth, or the fact that he didn't know what to do about it. The old man finally spoke again, his voice softer now but still firm. "Now tell me, Mr. Adil." He tilted his head slightly, his eyes unblinking. "What happens next?" Mr. Adil had no answer, and the entire bank waited in silence. Mr. Adil's hands felt clammy as he held the old documents. He could hear the whispering around him, the weight of 100 curious eyes pressing against him. The bank had always been a place of order, a place where numbers made sense, where everything was accounted for. But now, standing in front of this old man with his sack full of unsettling history, nothing felt certain anymore. He cleared his throat, forcing a breath into his lungs. "Sir," he said carefully, trying to regain some authority, "I need time to verify these documents." The old man nodded, as if he had expected this response. "Take your time," he said. "But know this, I have waited decades for someone to listen. I won't be ignored again." The security guard finally stepped forward, his stance cautious. "Sir, I need you to step aside while the manager reviews these documents." The old man didn't argue. He adjusted the sack on his shoulder and moved toward a nearby bench. He sat down slowly, his body showing the exhaustion of years that no one else in the room could truly understand. Mr. Adil turned to the younger employee. "Get the legal team on the phone. Now." The employee rushed back to his desk, fumbling with his phone. Mr. Adil took a deep breath and walked toward his office, gripping the papers tightly. He could feel his pulse in his throat. If these documents were real, if there was even a shred of truth in them, then the bank was standing on stolen land. And if that information got out, it wouldn't just be a legal issue. It would be a scandal. Inside his office, he locked the door and sat down heavily in his chair. He spread the papers out on his desk, running his fingers over the faded text, the government stamps that looked too authentic to be dismissed. He picked up his phone and called the head of legal affairs. "Zahid," he said, his voice tense, "I need you to come to the bank. Now." Back in the main hall, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Some customers had left, but many stayed, too intrigued by the mystery unfolding before them. The old man sat still, watching everything unfold as if he were seeing history repeat itself. A woman in her 40s, wearing a blue shawl, hesitated before stepping closer to him. "Baba Ji," she said softly, addressing him with respect. "What really happened? How did your family lose this land?" The old man looked up at her, his tired eyes scanning her face, searching for sincerity. He nodded slowly and began to speak, his voice steady but carrying the weight of a past no one had cared to hear before. "A long time ago," he said, "my grandfather owned this land. It was different then. There were no tall buildings, no glass doors, no security cameras. Just open fields, homes made of strong hands and honest work. My father grew up here. I grew up here." The woman sat down next to him, listening intently. Others gathered closer, drawn to the story. Even the security guard, who had been standing nearby, lowered his guard slightly. "Then one day," the old man continued, "they came with papers, with words we did not understand, with threats we did not know how to fight. They told us the land was no longer ours, that we had to leave. My father, he fought. He went to offices, to courts, to men in suits who did not see us as people, only as problems to be removed. His hands tightened into fists on his lap. But we had no power, no money, and so we lost. We were pushed out, forced to start again with nothing." A heavy silence followed. A young man standing nearby, holding a briefcase, frowned. "If your family lost the land legally, then why do you still have these papers?" The old man looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Because my father never gave up. He collected every record, every proof. He told me, one day the truth will matter again." He exhaled, glancing toward Mr. Adil's office. "I've waited a lifetime for that day." The tension in the bank only grew thicker. The people who had laughed before now stood uncertain, the weight of the old man's words pressing down on them. Inside the office, Mr. Adil was pacing when the door opened and Zahid, the legal head, walked in. He was an older man, sharp-eyed and serious, dressed in a crisp gray suit. He took one look at the papers spread across the desk and frowned. "What is this?" Zahid asked, picking up the top document. "An old man walked in here today claiming this land was stolen from his family," Mr. Adil said, rubbing his temples. "And he has documents." Zahid's frown deepened as he scanned the papers. His expression remained unreadable, but the way he tapped his fingers against the desk showed he was thinking fast. "These documents," he muttered. "They're too detailed to be fake." Mr. Adil felt his stomach sink. "So, what does that mean?" Zahid exhaled sharply. "It means we have a problem." Outside, the old man remained seated, waiting. A man in a suit, clearly a businessman, scoffed. "Even if the land was once yours, what do you expect to happen now? The bank isn't just going to pack up and leave." The old man turned to him, his gaze steady. "I expect justice." The businessman smirked. "Justice? In this world?" He shook his head. "You're living in the past, Babaji. Even if you're right, nothing will change." The old man didn't flinch. "Truth doesn't disappear just because people stop believing in it." The words struck something in the crowd. People who had been skeptical now found themselves questioning what they had always accepted. The land beneath their feet. Had it always belonged to the bank, or had they been walking over stolen history? The security guard, who had remained silent for so long, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. "If this was your land, Babaji, then what do you want now?" The old man looked at him, really looked at him, as if he were the only person in the room who had asked the right question. He let the silence stretch before answering. "I want my story to be heard," he said. "And I want those who took what wasn't theirs to answer for it." Behind the glass walls of his office, Mr. Adil and Zahid were still deep in discussion. Zahid tapped a document with his finger. "If this gets out, there could be an inquiry. A legal battle." He met Mr. Adil's eyes. You need to make a decision, quickly. Mr. Adil's throat felt dry. Outside his office, people were still whispering, still waiting. The old man wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time in his career, Mr. Adil wasn't sure if he was on the right side of history. Mr. Adil stared at the documents on his desk, his mind racing. Every passing second felt heavier, like a weight pressing down on his chest. Zahid was still flipping through the papers, his expression unreadable, but the tension in his posture said enough. If these documents were real, if the old man's claims were valid, then the bank, his bank, was standing on stolen land. Outside, the murmurs in the bank grew louder. Customers who had initially been amused by the old man's claim now stood in small clusters, whispering among themselves. Some looked at him with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with suspicion. The security guard shifted uncomfortably, torn between doing his job and acknowledging the gravity of the situation. The old man remained seated, his back straight, his hands resting on his lap. He didn't look impatient. He didn't even look hopeful. He just waited, as if he had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Mr. Adil exhaled sharply and turned to Zahid. What do we do? Zahid leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the desk. We need to verify these documents through official records. But if they check out? He paused, glancing toward the glass walls of the office where the old man sat outside. This isn't just a legal issue. This is a reputational nightmare. Mr. Adil felt a chill run through him. You mean? I mean, if this story gets out, people will question everything. The bank's integrity, its history, even our leadership. Zahid's voice was low but firm. We can't afford a scandal like this. Mr. Adil rubbed his temples. His entire career had been built on stability, on maintaining order. He had always believed that the bank operated by the book, that everything was legal and accounted for. But now doubt gnawed at him. What if they really had built their success on something that had never rightfully belonged to them? A sudden knock on the door made both men jolt. The younger employee from earlier peeked in, his face pale. Sir, he said hesitantly, the old man, he says he has a witness. Zahid and Mr. Adil exchanged glances. A witness, Zahid repeated. The employee nodded. He says there's someone alive who remembers when the land was taken. Mr. Adil felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't just an old document anymore. This was turning into something bigger. Back in the main hall, the atmosphere was thick with suspense. People had stopped pretending to mind their own business. They were fully invested now, their eyes darting between the old man and the office door, waiting for the next development. The old man looked up as Mr. Adil and Zahid stepped out. His eyes, still sharp despite his age, locked onto them. You say you want proof, the old man said, his voice steady. Then listen to someone who lived through it. He turned his head slightly, and the crowd instinctively followed his gaze. From the entrance, a frail but dignified woman stepped forward. Her hair was gray, her steps careful, but there was something unshaken in her posture. She was dressed modestly, her hands wrinkled with time, yet her eyes burned with clarity. My name is Salma, she said, her voice soft yet commanding. And I remember. A hush fell over the bank. Even the security guard, who had been maintaining his distance, took a step closer. Salma walked slowly, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for something long lost. I was a young girl when they came, she said, her voice carrying through the silent room. Men with papers. Officials who spoke of laws we didn't understand. They told our fathers, our brothers, that we had to leave. That this land was no longer ours. Mr. Adil swallowed hard. He had expected old documents, maybe even a legal dispute, but he hadn't expected living proof. Salma turned to the old man and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. His father fought for this land, she continued. I remember him. A proud, stubborn man who never bowed to anyone. She looked back at the crowd. They called it progress, said it was for the future. But what future? Her voice tightened with emotion. They built their future on our loss. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some looked at Mr. Adil, waiting for his response. Others just stood there, absorbing the weight of the story. Zahid took a step forward, his face unreadable. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "do you have any proof of what you're saying?" Salma smiled sadly. What proof does a child carry when she watches her home disappear? She glanced at the old man. But he has the proof. His father kept everything. And I was there. I saw it happen. Mr. Adil felt the weight of 100 eyes pressing on him. He could feel the tension in the air, the way people were beginning to question things they had never thought about before. Then a voice from the back of the crowd spoke up. "If he's right," a man in a business suit said cautiously, "what happens next?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. The old man didn't answer immediately. He looked at Mr. Adil, his expression unreadable. "That," he said finally, "is for them to decide." Everyone turned to Mr. Adil. The pressure was suffocating. His mind raced through possible outcomes. Deny the claim. Try to settle it quietly. Or do something he never thought he would have to do. Zahid leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "We need to be careful. If we acknowledge this, we open doors we can't close." Mr. Adil's fingers tightened around the papers in his hand. The truth was there, staring him in the face. But was he ready to face it? The room was silent, waiting for his answer. And for the first time in his life, Mr. Adil had no idea what to say. Mr. Adil stood frozen, his grip tightening around the papers as if they could somehow anchor him in the storm that was building inside the bank. Every eye in the room was locked onto him, waiting for his next move. He could feel Zahid's presence beside him, the legal advisor's warning still ringing in his ears. But before he could form a response, a new voice cut through the silence. "I wouldn't be so quick to assume the bank is at fault," a man's voice echoed from the entrance. Heads turned sharply as a well-dressed man in his late 40s stepped inside. His posture was straight, his expression calm but calculating. He wore a crisp black suit and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who was used to being in control. Mr. Adil recognized him immediately. Shabir Malik, a senior board member of the bank. A man whose presence in this situation only made things more complicated. The old man's face darkened as he saw Shabir. His fingers curled slightly around the edge of his sack, but he didn't speak. Shabir walked forward, his polished shoes clicking softly against the floor. "I received a call about a disturbance," he said, glancing at Mr. Adil before turning his gaze toward the old man. "And I must say I find these claims interesting." There was something in the way he said the word interesting that sent a ripple of unease through the room. The old man stared at him, his eyes sharp with recognition. "You," he said, his voice low. "I remember you." Shabir barely reacted. "Do you?" he asked, his tone polite but devoid of warmth. The old man straightened, his grip tightening on his sack. "Your father," he continued. "He was there when they took everything from us. I remember his face. I remember his name." A murmur spread through the crowd. Even Salma, who had stood strong until now, seemed unsettled by the revelation. Shabir exhaled slowly, as if he had been expecting this. "That was a long time ago," he said. "And whatever happened back then, well, I doubt it changes anything now." The old man let out a bitter laugh. "That's what you people always say, don't you? It was a long time ago. As if time washes away wrongdoing. As if time erases the truth." Shabir's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of something behind his eyes. Calculation. A decision being weighed. Mr. Adil watched the exchange, his mind working frantically. He had thought the biggest problem was the old man's claim, but now it was something else. Something deeper. Shabir finally turned to Mr. Adil. "I trust you haven't made any rash decisions yet." His words were measured, careful. Mr. Adil hesitated. I was in the process of verifying the documents. Shabir nodded, then turned back to the old man. And if they are real? His voice was smooth, almost too smooth. What then? Do you expect the bank to simply hand over everything? To undo decades of business over something that happened before half the people in this room were even born? The old man met his gaze without flinching. I expect the truth to be acknowledged. I expect justice. Shabir smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Justice, he repeated. And if justice is inconvenient, if it threatens to collapse everything people have built. There it was. The quiet threat, hidden beneath polite words. The crowd felt it too. Some shifted uncomfortably, others exchanged nervous glances. Salma's voice cut through the tension. Justice isn't about convenience, she said firmly. It's about doing what's right. Shabir turned to her, and for the first time, his composure wavered. And what exactly do you think is right, madam? She didn't blink. Returning what was stolen. A sharp silence fell over the room. Shabir chuckled softly. And you truly believe that's possible? The old man's hand moved to his sack, and for the first time he reached inside. The air grew thick with anticipation. From the sack, he pulled out a small locked box, weathered with age, its metal edges rusted but still intact. He placed it gently on the counter. This, he said, was my father's. He told me to open it when the time was right. His gaze flickered to Shabir. I believe that time is now. Even Mr. Adil felt himself leaning forward slightly. Whatever was inside that box could change everything. The old man carefully pulled a key from a string around his neck. His fingers trembled slightly as he inserted it into the lock. With a soft click, the box opened. Inside was a stack of yellowed papers, bound together by an old ribbon. But that wasn't what made the crowd gasp. There, among the papers, was a faded black and white photograph. A group of men standing in front of an empty field. One of them unmistakably a younger version of Shabir Malik's father. And standing right beside him was a much younger Salma. Her face frozen in time, her eyes filled with fear. A chill spread through the room. For the first time, Shabir's confident mask slipped. And in that moment, Mr. Adil realized something. This wasn't just about land. This was about something much, much bigger. A heavy silence settled over the bank. The old man's fingers hovered over the photograph, tracing the faded image of men who had long since disappeared into history. Salma stood frozen, her eyes locked onto her own younger face, the girl she had been, the girl who had watched everything taken from her family. Shabir Malik's face had lost its composure. The confident, polished man was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he had just seen a ghost. His father's face in the photograph was undeniable proof, standing beside the men responsible for forcing people off this land. The weight of the truth had finally caught up to him. Mr. Adil felt something shift inside him. He had spent his entire career believing in rules, in structure, in the order of things. But now, looking at the undeniable evidence before him, he realized something. Justice wasn't just about legal documents. It was about people. About the stories that had been buried for too long. Shabir took a step forward, his jaw tightening. This doesn't prove anything, he said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had before. A photograph. From decades ago. That doesn't mean the bank did anything wrong. The old man let out a bitter chuckle. You're still trying to deny it, he said. Even with the truth staring you in the face. He lifted the papers from the box and held them up. These are signed agreements. The ones my father refused to sign, but the ones others were forced into. Have names. Witnesses. His voice did not shake. Tell me, Mr. Malik, how much longer will you pretend? Shabir's face darkened. His fingers curled into fists, but he said nothing. The crowd had grown restless. Whispers filled the air. Uncertainty creeping into the voices of the bank employees, the customers, even the security guard who had been watching everything unfold. Some looked at Shabir with suspicion now, others with quiet disappointment. Mr. Adil knew what had to be done. He turned to Zahid, who had remained silent for most of the confrontation. The legal advisor's face was unreadable, but when he met Mr. Adil's gaze, he gave a small nod. He understood. Taking a deep breath, Mr. Adil looked at the old man. "Sir," he said, his voice steady, "I believe you." The old man's expression did not change, but in his eyes, there was something close to relief. Shabir whipped his head toward Mr. Adil. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "This is insane. You can't." "I can," Mr. Adil interrupted, his voice firmer than it had ever been. "And I will." He turned to the bank employees. "We will conduct a full investigation into this claim, starting immediately." His gaze moved to Zahid. "If these documents are verified, we will ensure that justice is served." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Even those who had initially laughed at the old man now seemed to understand that this was no longer just a story. It was the truth. Shabir took a step back, his face a storm of emotions. He glanced at the photograph once more, then at the crowd watching him. His power, his influence, it was slipping through his fingers. And then, just when it seemed like he might lash out, he did something no one expected. He laughed. A dry, humorless chuckle. "You think this changes anything?" he said, shaking his head. "You think tearing down the bank's reputation will fix the past?" He looked at the old man. "You can win in public opinion, you can even win in court, but the damage is done. This world belongs to people like me, whether you like it or not." The old man studied him for a long moment. Then very slowly he smiled. "You're wrong," he said softly. "It doesn't belong to you." Before Shabir could respond, the bank doors swung open. A group of reporters flooded in, cameras flashing, microphones extended. Someone had called them. Maybe a witness, maybe one of the customers, but it didn't matter. The story was out. Shabir paled. He turned to Mr. Adil. "You." But Mr. Adil shook his head. "I didn't call them," he said. "The truth did." As the cameras focused on the old man, on Salma, on the photograph that had survived decades to tell its story, something shifted in the air. The power had changed hands. Not through force, not through money, but through something stronger, justice. Shabir knew it was over. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the bank, his footsteps heavy with the weight of a truth he could no longer escape. The old man watched him go, then turned back to Mr. Adil. "Thank you," he said simply. Mr. Adil exhaled. "No," he replied. "Thank you." Because for the first time in his life, he had done something that truly mattered. And as the cameras flashed, capturing a moment that would never be forgotten, he knew this was only the beginning. The bank was never the same after that day. The story spread like wildfire. Headlines in newspapers, viral posts on social media, news channels covering the scandal of the year. The image of the old man standing with his sack, the faded photograph in his hands, became a symbol of something bigger than just one man's fight for justice. It was about all those whose voices had been drowned out by power and time. For Mr. Adil, the days that followed were a whirlwind. The bank's board launched a formal investigation into the claims, and under immense public pressure, Shabir Malik was forced to resign. His carefully built reputation crumbled, and although he tried to fight back, the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The land, the stolen property, the forced evictions, it was all there in black and white. Too many people had suffered, and now the world finally saw the truth. Zahid, the legal advisor, worked tirelessly to ensure the rightful legal process was followed. He reviewed the documents with a team of specialists, and within weeks, the findings were confirmed. The old man's claim was legitimate. The bank, knowingly or unknowingly, had been sitting on stolen land. The official statement came soon after. Ownership would be transferred back, and financial compensation would be provided to affected families. It wasn't just a victory for the old man. It was a victory for everyone who had been wronged. People who had lost their homes, their land, their dignity. They would finally have something returned to them. The day the papers were signed, the old man stood outside the bank, the sun warm on his weathered face. His sack was slung over his shoulder as always, but this time it felt lighter. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded, as if he had known all along that justice would find its way back, no matter how long it took. Salma stood beside him, watching the bank's signboard being replaced. She had stayed quiet through most of the legal battles, but today, she allowed herself a small smile. It had taken decades, but the past had finally been acknowledged. Mr. Adil approached them, his hands in his pockets, a thoughtful look on his face. "It's done," he said. "You won." The old man studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said. "We all did." Mr. Adil felt something shift inside him. He had spent his life believing that his job was just to keep things running, to follow policies and protocols. But now he understood that sometimes real change didn't come from rules. It came from standing up when it mattered most. As the weeks passed, things slowly returned to normal, though nothing would ever be exactly the same. Mr. Adil remained at the bank, but he worked differently now. He paid more attention, asked more questions, made sure that no one was ever dismissed the way the old man had been when he first walked in. Zahid too found a new purpose. The case had reignited something in him, a drive to help those who couldn't fight for themselves. He started working with advocacy groups, using his expertise to uncover more cases of land fraud and financial exploitation. He knew the battle wasn't over. There were still too many people who had been wronged, too many voices still unheard. As for Shabir Malik, his fall from grace was swift. His connections, his wealth, his influence, none of it could shield him from the truth. He faced multiple lawsuits, and though he tried to salvage what was left of his career, the damage was done. His name became a cautionary tale, a reminder that power built on dishonesty could never last forever. One evening, months later, Mr. Adil found himself taking a quiet walk near the old district, where so much of this story had begun. He spotted the old man sitting on a wooden bench, watching the sunset, his sack resting beside him. Without a word, Mr. Adil sat down next to him. They didn't need to speak. There was an understanding between them now, something deeper than words. After a long moment, the old man finally broke the silence. "Do you know why I carried this sack all these years?" Mr. Adil turned to him, waiting. The old man patted the rough fabric. "Because it was a reminder of what was taken. A reminder that even if the world forgets, I wouldn't." He looked at the horizon. "But now I think I can finally put it down." Mr. Adil exhaled, feeling the weight of those words. The old man smiled, his eyes twinkling with something close to peace. "Thank you," he said simply. Mr. Adil nodded. "No," he replied, just as he had before. "Thank you." And as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows over the city, the old man stood up. He slung the sack over his shoulder one last time, then slowly walked away. This time he left it behind. And just like that, the story that had started with laughter in a bank ended with something far greater. Justice, closure, and the quiet strength of a man who never stopped believing that the truth would one day be heard.